In this video, we're going to take a look at transactions and reports in Give. Here we can see the transactions that I have done during this series. It says at the top here, note, test mode is enabled. Only test donations are being displayed. That's all there actually are, since I've never used this as a real site. But here you can see the email, the amount, the status, the date, the user, and a link to view details. You can also optionally resend the donation receipt from right here. Let's view donation details. Here at the top we can see what form was filled out, the date and time, and the total donation. Then there's the donor's details, and I didn't fill out the billing information, otherwise it would be here. But it could be updated right here and right now. Then there are some payment notes. This is for administrators, people who have access to this page specifically. They can make notes about this transaction. This can be useful if someone calls to change their donation or has a complaint or something like that. In the top right here we can set the status to pending, refunded, failed, abandoned, or revoked. We can change the date and time that it was submitted, and we can change the total price. Then here we could resend the receipt as well. The payment meta is some information about this payment. What gateway we're using, a custom key for this transaction, the IP of the submitter, and a transaction ID. And here's a link to view all donations for this donor. Since I'm the only one, it looks exactly like the other form. However, if we had several hundred listings, and you clicked that link, then you would see only the ones for this donor. This gets more and more useful as time goes on. You'll note at the top there's also a search and a start and end date. If you use this plugin for years, and you have dozens and dozens of forms, and you have loyal givers who give $10 every time you put something up, then it can become useful to say, I only want to search in a certain month and to see who gave then, or I only want to see a certain user to look for a pattern, or I only want to look for this certain user in this time to look for fraud. The searching can be extremely useful the more donors you get. Now let's take a look at reports. Right now we're showing income over time. Total income for period is $35, donations was 2, estimated monthly income 0, and monthly donations 0. We didn't allow for monthly donations. Now we can also choose forms. And we're showing $0 because we were in test mode. But if you were in real mode, you would be able to see the various success rates of all of your different forms and view a detailed report. We can show donors. There's only been one donor. The other list of donors that we saw listed every donation. This lists only donors with their totals. So this list would theoretically be much shorter. Here you have an option to search donors. So if you have a great many of them, it's easy to find them. And then you can look at payment methods. This is particularly useful if you have some payment methods that are kind of expensive. For example, if you use one payment method that takes a 5% cut, which is far higher than the others, and you realize that only 2 people have ever used it, you could just drop it out of your system altogether. And by the same token, if you have one that nobody ever uses, you should drop it, regardless of what it costs, because it only makes the system more complex. You can see here that we've only had 2, and they're both test payments. Now let's look at the export options we have. Right here at the top, we can generate a PDF. And Chrome just downloaded it for me. And here I am looking at it. The information isn't very different from the other forms we've looked at, but it is in a nice PDF and easy to send to people. Here we can look at income and donation stats. exported in CSV, and you can put in a date span. This is nice for pulling it into Excel or Access or something like that, and doing some math and statistical analysis on it. And you can do the same with donation history and donors. Being able to export donors is pretty significant because you may have a donors database and you may want to incorporate this information into that database. And lastly here we have a logs tab. If there were any problems, they would get logged here. We haven't had any. There are payment errors and API requests. So these kinds of errors would come from, say, perhaps PayPal being down or Stripe being down. You would get a note in here, and it would tell you information about who tried to make the donation and when and things like that. And you could get back with those people and let them know what's going on. That's all there is for the Give plugin. It's very flexible, yet very simple and very solid. You'll want to make sure that you're running your site over SSL so that your transactions are secure. But other than that, it's very simple to set up and quite pleasant to use. If you're going to accept donations and you don't want to use a service, I highly recommend that you use this plugin.